Somewhere in the world right now, a 19-year-old is signing a loan document with a shaking hand. 4 years, 8 semesters, 1 economics degree. Total cost at a private American university, $200,000. And here is the secret their professors will never say into a microphone: the entire degree exists to install one sentence in your head. One sentence. Everything else is packaging. By the end of this video, you will know that sentence. And you'll have gotten it for free. But you don't get to skip ahead. Because here's the deal. For the next 15 minutes, you are that student. 4 years are about to happen to you at high speed. Ready? The pen touches the paper. Sign. Day 1. Year 1. You walk into a lecture hall that smells like old carpet and new anxiety, and a professor writes a single word on the board: scarcity. Then he says the most honest thing you'll hear in 4 years. This entire field exists because of one problem. You want infinite things. The world contains finite things. That's it. That's economics. Every human wants more than exists: more time, more houses, more energy, more attention. Which means every choice you ever make is secretly 2 choices: the thing you picked and the thing you killed to pick it. Economists call the corpse opportunity cost. Your seat in this room is costing you the salary you're not earning, the sleep you're not getting. Nothing you ever do is free. Everything costs something else. Write that down. You'll need it. Week 6, you meet the idea that quietly runs the planet: trade. 2 neighbors. One catches fish brilliantly and farms terribly. The other farms brilliantly and can't catch a cold. Separately, they both half-starve. Trading, they both eat like kings. Obvious. But here's the version that breaks people's brains. Even if one of them is better at both jobs, they're still both richer if each specializes in trades for the rest. That's comparative advantage, and it's why the doctor who types faster than her secretary still hires the secretary. An hour spent typing is an hour of surgery she can't do. Everything costs something else. Then, markets. A market isn't a building, it's a conversation. And the language is price. When something gets scarce, its price rises. And that rising number is a message broadcast to the whole species at once: make more of this, use less of this. That message is an incentive, and economics trusts incentives, never intentions. Millions of strangers he will never meet, coordinating without a commander. Supply is what sellers offer at each price. Demand is what buyers take. Where they cross equilibrium, shelves neither overflow nor empty. And when governments simply declare a nicer price, cap rent below equilibrium, and apartments vanish into waiting lists. Floor a price above it, and warehouses drown in surplus. You can outlaw a price. You cannot outlaw a cost. It just changes shape and comes back as a cue. $50,000 down. 3 years left. And year 2 is where students start dropping out. Because year 2 is where money itself stops making sense. Money. Why does it exist? Because barter has a fatal flaw. You have chickens, you want shoes, and the shoemaker is vegan. Trade dies right there. So humans invented a middle thing everyone accepts: shells, salt, cigarettes, and prisons. Money is whatever does 3 jobs. It moves value, it stores value, it measures value. And notice what your professor slips in almost casually: the paper itself is worthless. Money is a shared hallucination that works because we all keep hallucinating together. Banks are where the hallucination gets stored, and when you borrow some, you pay rent on it. That rent is called interest. Then Adam Smith walks into the syllabus with the most famous idea in the field. Your dinner doesn't come from the baker's kindness. It comes from his self-interest. He feeds you to feed himself, and somehow a million selfish decisions braid together into cities that eat every single day. Smith called it the invisible hand. But who bakes, and with what? Every product on earth is a recipe of 3 ingredients: land, labor, and capital, the stuff of nature, the sweat of people, the tools and machines. And here's the assumption destroyer of year 2. Nations don't get rich by working harder. Garment workers in poor countries work brutally hard. Nations get rich when 1 hour of work produces more than it used to: better tools, better ideas, better systems. That's productivity, and it's the closest thing to a free lunch in this entire subject. Closest, not free. So how do you measure a whole economy? GDP, the price tag on everything a country produces in a year. Count it 3 ways: everything spent, everything earned, everything made, and you get the same number, because your spending is someone else's income. The formula: consumption plus investment plus government spending plus exports minus imports. But GDP is a scale that weighs some strange things. A mother raising 3 kids full-time, 0 GDP. A hurricane flattening a city and the rebuilding after, GDP goes up. It measures activity, not well-being, and divided per person, per capita, or a huge poor country looks richer than a small rich one. And economies breathe. Economic growth producing more this year than last. Expansion, boom, then someday spending falls. Businesses cut jobs. The jobless spend even less. Recession. Let it spiral deep and long enough. Depression. That whole heartbeat is 2 forces wrestling: aggregate demand, everything buyers want to spend, against aggregate supply, everything producers can make. Meanwhile, prices creep upward. Inflation, either because too much money is chasing too few goods, or because something on the supply side snapped, like oil in the 70s, when the nightmare combo arrived. Prices rising while the economy shrinks. Stagflation. It's all tracked by the CPI, a fixed basket of groceries, rent, and fuel, repriced every month like a heart monitor. And not everyone even pays the same price. The airline charges the businessman triple what the student paid for the same seat. Price discrimination, charging each buyer whatever they'll bear. $100,000 down. Halfway, and year 3 is when they finally show you the rooms where money is actually made. You will not sleep well this semester. Room 1. The central bank. Here's what nobody tells you before this course: most new money is not printed. It's typed. When a central bank wants the economy to speed up, it cuts interest rates. Loans get cheap, businesses borrow, you buy the house. Wants to cool inflation? Rates go up, borrowing hurts, spending slows. That's loose versus tight monetary policy. And when rates hit 0, and it still isn't enough, the bank creates money electronically and buys assets. Quantitative easing. But this machine has a horror setting. Print recklessly and you get Zimbabwe in 2008, where prices doubled roughly every day. Or Germany in 1923, wheelbarrows of cash for a loaf of bread. Money is trust wearing a costume. Kill the trust, and the costume is just paper. Room 2. Your own bank. Brace yourself. The money you deposited? It's not there. Banks keep a fraction and lend out the rest, and here's the part that flips everything. When a bank issues a loan, it doesn't hand over someone else's savings. It creates a brand new deposit with keystrokes. Most money in existence was born as somebody's debt. The system works beautifully until everyone wants their cash on the same afternoon. A bank run, which is why deposit insurance exists, a promise designed to make itself unnecessary. Nobody runs if everyone knows they'll be paid. Room 3. The government. It taxes your income, your spending, your profits, your property. Progressive taxes take a bigger percentage from bigger earners. Flat taxes take the same slice from everyone, and the fight over which is fairer will outlive us all. But why tax at all? Because some things markets refuse to build. No company sells streetlights, because you can't stop non-payers from walking under them. Public goods. And when a government spends more than it collects, a deficit. Collect more than you spend and it's a surplus. Rare enough to make headlines, it borrows by selling bonds. And the pile of every unpaid deficit in history is the national debt. Is that a crisis? It comes down to one race. If the economy grows faster than the interest on the debt, a country can carry it forever. If it doesn't, welcome to default. Ask Argentina how many times a nation can join that club. Everything costs something else. Even the spending that felt free. Then the map zooms out. Countries trade for the exact reason the fisherman and the farmer did. Remember them? Comparative advantage at planetary scale. Let goods cross borders freely. Free trade, and you get globalization. Your phone designed in California, chips from Taiwan, assembly in China, sold in Berlin. Politicians who want to shield local industry reach for protectionism, tariffs, quotas, subsidies, and here's the receipt they never show you: a tariff is paid at the register. By you. And because every country prices life in its own currency, there's a market for money itself, Forex, the largest market on Earth. Currencies float with supply and demand. Strengthening is appreciation. Weakening is depreciation, or governments pin them at a fixed rate. And when a country runs out of reserves, defending a price that isn't real, the peg snaps and life savings halve overnight. A currency crisis is a bank run on an entire nation, and one ship showed the world how tightly it's all wired together. March 2021, the Ever Given turns sideways in the Suez Canal, and for 6 days, close to $10 billion of trade per day just waits. One stuck ship. Around the same time, a shortage of $2 computer chips was shutting down entire car factories. Global supply chains are miracles with almost no margin for error. $150,000 down. Final year. And in year 4, the subject turns around and studies something far messier than money. Your salary is a price set by the supply of people who can do what you do against the demand for it. Rare and needed. Expensive. Common and replaceable. Cheap. That's why skills move wages more than effort does, and why automation is the plot twist of the century. Machines erasing some jobs, creating others, and stretching the gap between the people on each side. Unemployment comes in flavors. Between jobs, wrong skills for a changed market, or a recession shedding workers by the million. Unions bargain wages upward as a block. Minimum wage laws set a legal floor, a raise for some workers, fewer openings for others, and economists are still brawling over where that trade-off lands. Then comes the one honest investing lecture that outperforms 1,000 gurus. A stock is a slice of a company. A bond is a loan you're giving. Derivatives are bets built on top of other bets, the things that detonated in 2008. Crypto is the newest attempt at money with no government behind it. And 2 laws rule all of it. First, risk and return are married. Anyone promising high returns with zero risk is describing a crime. Second, diversification spreading across many assets so no single disaster can sink you. Then, the efficient market hypothesis quietly insults everyone in the room. Prices already contain all public information. So that hot stock tip you just heard, it's already in the price. You were the last to know, not the first. But then why are entire countries still poor? Not laziness. Nature itself can be a trap. Nations that strike oil often rot around it, because the treasure funds the government without needing taxpayers, and a government that doesn't need its people stops answering to them. The resource curse. What separates rich nations from poor ones, decade after decade, is mostly institutions, courts that enforce contracts, laws that protect property, states that can't simply take your things. Without them, poverty locks itself in. Too poor to save, so no capital, so no productivity, so poor again. A poverty trap. And it's why foreign aid alone keeps disappointing. You can wire money. You cannot wire trust in a legal system. And in your final semester, economics confesses. Its founding assumption that humans are rational calculators is false. Losing $100 hurts roughly twice as much as winning 100 feels good. Loss aversion. The first number you hear drags every later judgment toward it. Anchoring. You buy what everyone's buying at the top and sell in the panic at the bottom. Herd behavior. You finish a terrible movie because you already paid for the ticket, throwing good time after bad money, the sunk cost fallacy. And governments now use these glitches gently, make retirement saving the default, and enrollment soars. Same choices, different framing. A nudge. Which leaves one final lecture. Who should decide what gets made? Capitalism says markets and private owners. Socialism says the public should own the biggest levers. Communism says the state owns everything, and every large-scale attempt collapsed into shortages because abolishing prices abolishes the information inside them. But here's the graduating secret. No pure system exists anywhere. America has public schools. China has billionaires. Every economy on Earth is a mixed economy, and politics is just the permanent argument over the mix. Every system is a different answer to scarcity. No system abolishes it. Everything, everywhere, still costs something else. Graduation day, $200,000, gone. And now the sentence. The one the entire degree was built to install. You already know it. You've heard it in every room every year all the way through. Everything costs something else. Economists dress it up as there's no such thing as a free lunch. But it's the same blade. The rent cap that becomes a waiting list. The printed money that becomes Zimbabwe. The tariff that becomes your receipt. The oil that becomes a curse. 4 years, one sentence, nothing is free, the cost just hides. And the entire education is learning where it hides. Which means this video wasn't free either. It cost you 15 minutes. But you were choosing between 15 minutes and 4 years, between $0 and 200,000, and you just made the highest return trade of your week. That's the skill. If you caught yourself doing that math, congratulations. You didn't just watch this degree. You passed it. Because the kind of person who asks, what is this really costing and who's actually paying, can never be fully fooled again. Not by a politician, not by a bank, not by a sales sign. But there's one door from year 3. We walked past too fast the room where banks legally create money out of thin air every single day, possibly with your name on the paperwork. Next video, we open that door. Class dismissed.